Welcome to the Lawyers Weekly Show for an in-depth look at the issues facing the legal profession.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of the Lawyers Weekly Show. My name's Jerome Doraisamy. I'm coming to you today from Camaragal Land in Sydney, and I'm very pleased to be joined for this conversation by Andrew De Celis, who is a general counsel at Telstra. Andrew and I have worked together on a number of panel discussions at our annual Corporate Counsel Summit, but it's nice to have him in the studio for a podcast this time. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jerome. Thanks for having me.
Today, we're going to be talking about how the legal profession at the start of the age of AI is kind of like the music industry at the start of the internet. And what are some of the lessons that we can learn from the music industry's experience, and more broadly about how best lawyers and the profession at large can and should be moving through these weird and wonderful times. Andrew, before we get into all of that, tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do at Telstra.
Thanks, Jerome. Yeah, so my career is a pretty typical one. Started as a graduate at a law firm, Gilbert and Tobin, and spent a lot of time just learning the ropes there, and learnt from some very experienced and really excellent practitioners. Whilst I was there, had the opportunity to work pretty closely with Telstra, and so when an opportunity to came up to work in-house with the Telstra team, I took that opportunity. I've been there for 12 years, and it's been an excellent place to learn and grow. My current role is really to, broadly speaking, lead the team that supports the consumer and product divisions of Telstra. And in practical terms, I guess what that means is when you're engaging with Telstra, whether that's watching a TV commercial or calling front of house or buying one of our products, my team's likely to have been in the background supporting everything that goes on behind that.
Yeah. And on a personal level, what's that like to head up a legal team whose business has such a strong influence over the day-to-day operations of Australian society?
It's actually quite energising. So this is my personal experience, and I know many of my team members express this. The opportunity to actually have impact for customers every single day is something that really energises me and the team. And so, yeah, it comes with a lot of responsibility, but it's a real privilege.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the AI era and what we can and should be learning from our experiences thus far, and from how other sectors have adapted to times of voluminous change. Perhaps a good starting point here, Andrew, is to get your headline reflections on I guess how well the legal profession is doing in pivoting, in the age of AI, and what are some of your headline takeaways from the last year or two?
Yeah, thanks, Jerome. I like to make this comparison with the music industry because I think it can reveal a few things. And so the story I like to sort of start with is when you think about how you accessed music before the internet, you would either listen to the radio and wait for your favourite song to come on, and if you had your blank cassette ready, you would press play record and hope that you captured that song, or you would go down to the local HMV store, you would search their catalogue, you would find the album you were looking for, you would then pay $30 for that album, you would take it home, you would put it in your CD player. Once you had done listening to it, you would then take your CD and put it in your CD rack.
I remember those days well.
Yes, that's right. And then when you had another $30, you would do the same thing and add that CD to your collection. And then the internet came along and disrupted everything. And the industry that we have today is vastly different. An industry that was structured for the distribution and sale of CDs no longer exists. And so when it comes to the legal industry, I think that's why I think some lessons can be learned we're at the start of the AI era, and there's no reason to believe that the legal industry wouldn't be disrupted at the same scale. And when I think about the things that the legal industry is grounded in, things like rules and precedent and mastery of words, these things AI is very good at. And so it's not a big leap to be making. In terms of the reflections of where we're at, I hear a lot of talk about shifting from experimentation to implementation. And it's early days there, but I think that's largely right. But to borrow this analogy, I think the industry we have is still structured for, if you like, the distribution and sale of CDs. We haven't seen any sort of structural type disruption yet. A lot of the implementation I'm seeing is really layering AI into existing scaffolding. Whether or not that remains to be the case, I don't know, but I think there are signals to suggest that there might be a more significant disruption.
Yeah, and just sort of circling back to the analogy you were using about the music industry and
Yes.
How we used to go and buy CDs, put them into the CD player, take them out all physically, manually, and then the internet completely revolutionized accessibility and distribution of music and also affordability as well. It sounds as though from what you're saying that legal profession and the lawyers within it may well need to be prepared for similar changes to even just some of those minor things you will be doing day to day. And instead of just building it into the existing scaffolding, to use your phrase, that you may need to kind of tear the whole house down and build it back up. My wife's an architect, and she often tells me that it can be cheaper to just knock a house down and start it again rather than trying to tinker around the edges.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because no one has a crystal ball, and so it is difficult to predict what might happen. I think I do think people's minds should be open to that. Do I think it will be completely dismantled and rebuilt? Probably not. I think there are a few lessons that can be learned from the music industry that would be helpful, and I'm happy to go through a few of them. I've sort of probably thought too much about this analogy, but if you like, I'll go through sort of three of them that might be worth exploring.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the first is that the technology, in this case the internet, changed the way people consume and pay for the product. And so, as we were just saying, the thing that I paid for was the CD. But the product I really wanted was the music. And so the internet and the evolution of the industry has meant that the thing that I now pay for is a subscription. It's really access is what I pay for. The product remains the same. It's music. And instead of getting access just to the music that's loaded on that CD, I now get access to an infinite catalogue. And so if I think about the legal profession, the product I'm seeking is the legal advice. The thing I pay for is the time billed on the file. Now, I know that there's other fee structures that exist, but time-based billing is still a common fee structure, and that's the thing I pay for. And so the open question is whether or not AI will in fact change the way that we consume and pay for legal services. And yeah, I don't know how that might play out, but I think that's an open question. And I think at the very least, AI will open up the prospect of new and different commercial models.
Yeah. I want to get into some of those other takeaways that you're alluding to, Andrew. But before we do, I wanted to follow up on that one, which we'll get to on the other side of this. Andrew, further to that first potential lesson, from the music industry for lawyers, and with that idea of you're paying for the full catalog of music now rather than a single CD or single album. Do you think perhaps the natural analogy there for legal services is that for yourself as a client, with an external panel of law firms, I would imagine that's what your team has. That instead of paying for XYZ services, you're getting the entire alphabet, or at least you now can reasonably expect or demand that you will then have access to the firm's other service and practice areas rather than simply the one that you have traditionally utilized.
Yes, I think I think the technology opens the possibility is what I would say, and I think it certainly opens room for a conversation, and I'm sure there are many service providers out there thinking about how they evolve their product offering, and it's a little bit different from the music industry in the sense that the way I consume music, it doesn't really matter if that music's heavy metal or pop. I consume it in the same way, but I think it's slightly different for the legal industry. There will be different service models for different types of law. But yeah, it certainly opens up the conversation.
And what's the next lesson that you wanted to flesh out?
Yeah, thank you. So the next one I thought would be helpful to explore just a little bit is that if I think about the impact on the music industry, the technology in that case displaced the gatekeeper in the value chain. So before the internet, the record labels controlled the key choke point in the value chain, which is largely the distribution point, and that made them the gatekeeper in the value chain, and that meant that they captured all of the value. The internet unlocked that choke point, and so we have seen new gatekeepers emerge. So the value has shifted from the record labels to the music platforms.
Yeah.
And so I think the lesson, I think for the legal industry is really to consider, well, what are the choke points in the legal services value chain for the legal services you're providing to your clients, whether you're an external provider or an in-house counsel like myself. Ask yourself whether or not AI is likely to unlock that particular choke point. And if the answer to that is yes, I think you need to be thinking deeply about what your response to that might be.
Yeah, so I guess that gets into questions around streamlining operations and internal processes. Do you have a firm view yet on the kinds of choke points that could be identified and resolved?
The short answer is no. I think there's naturally we all talk about low value, high volume work, and I think that's an obvious place to really drive value from AI. But I wouldn't stop there. I think there's opportunity right across the value chain. And my instinct on this is that you need to sort of pick slices of value at a time.
Okay. And does this relate at all to the idea about whether or not AI is going to be replacing jobs in the legal profession, or do you see that as being a separate consideration altogether?
I think it's quite separate.
Okay.
It is sort of related a little bit to the sort of the third insight that I was going to speak to, so I might go there now.
Please, yeah.
When you think about the music industry, the technology also unlocked untapped demand. So I don't know about you, Jerome. I'm listening to more music than I probably would have ever listened to if it weren't for that structural shift.
Yeah.
the breadth and richness of the sort of the catalogue of music that I listen to is so much broader than if that structural change didn't occur. I'm paying a subscription. My wife's paying a subscription. My kids have a subscription. I'm probably paying more for the music that I listen to than perhaps I might have in the past. I might have just had my CD collection and stuck to that, and I wouldn't be paying anything going forward. So there's this sort of untapped demand, I think, that got unlocked as a result of the abundance of access. And I think there's every reason to believe that for the legal industry, there is untapped demand that can be unlocked through AI. And I also think that AI itself will drive demand. And so a simple example that I like to give is that if AI accelerates the speed of deals, then it's safe to assume that we'll be doing more deals. So I think on the demand side, I think it's quite elastic, and I think there will be more demand than there is today. So just coming back to your question on what it means for jobs, I think it's not a sort of a one in, one out type equation, and I actually think that our jobs will be far more interesting than they are today.
And just on that point about, because deals can be done faster, therefore there'll be more deals, would it be fair to say also that, alongside that, and this has been spoken about a fair bit in the profession already, that by virtue of being able to churn through work faster, for lack of a better term, that lawyers can and should be pivoting towards, more advisory type services as opposed to simply the black letter work. Do you see that as kind of being wrapped up here as well?
Yeah, I think the way I would think about this is it's really important that you're thinking deeply about what it is that differentiates you from others in a world where AI is part of the value chain. And once you've got clarity on that, then you can double down on focusing on that as your sort of future success point.
Yeah, so a pretty big question to be answered, both by practitioners and by their teams. And I'm not sure that anyone could say with complete confidence that they would 100% know the answer to that, given how much things keep changing day to day.
The pace of change is wild. Yeah. It's super exciting, but it is impossible to predict where it might go. I think that's what makes it exciting, but it's certainly rapid fire. Yeah.
So for a general counsel like yourself, as a team leader in one of Australia's biggest companies, how do you then look to put one foot in front of the other, having reflected on those three lessons from the experience of the music industry? Do you have a checklist right now, or are there certain questions that you're looking to answer of yourself and your team as you try to move forward?
Yeah, it's a great question, and something I've been thinking pretty deeply about. One of my accountabilities, I should have mentioned this at the start, is to sort of lead the AI transformation for our team. So I have been giving it a lot of thought. And perhaps the best way to respond to that is to share what are the things that I'm most focused on. And I can start by saying it's not on choosing the best technology. The focus is on how do we build the best system around the technology to harness it most effectively. And there are three things that we're focused on, really three components to that. So the first is workflows. So to unlock the real value of AI, you need to be reinventing your workflows and embedding AI in them. I don't think that you'll extract much value by simply handing AI to individuals and asking them to use it. You need to build it into the workflow. And then to reinvent your workflows, your data estate for those workflows needs to be AI ready. So data is our second pillar, if you like. And when it comes to data, I think it's the biggest opportunity for differentiation because your data is yours. You own it, and no one else has access to it. But it's also your biggest source of risk. You need to make sure that it's governed properly. And so the third element that we're focused on is our people. So the way I think about it is if your success depends on how effective you are at harnessing the technology, then you really need to be thinking about how you're building the team for the future that is able to harness that technology. And so these are the sort of those three things is where I think your value compounds. And the way I like to think about it is that anyone can access the best technology, but they can't access how you're harnessing that technology. And so that's why we're focused in those areas.
Andrew, I just have a few more questions for you, which we'll get to on the other side of this. Andrew, from what you're describing, it sounds as though structural change is inevitable. And bringing things back to the analogy we were using at the start with just tweaking the scaffolding or knocking the house down and starting again, sounds as though you're very much in the camp of rebuilds from the ground up rather than just make some tweaks here and there.
Yeah, I think the signals are certainly there. I think there is clear signals, some of which we've just talked about, that I think that the change that we're likely to see is more fundamental than incremental. Whether or not that's right or wrong, I don't really have an opinion. But I do think it will be more fundamental, and I think it's a privilege to be a part of kind of shaping what that might look like.
Yeah. So we're recording this a couple of weeks out from the new financial year, and teams will be looking at their budgets and how they're going to be allocating resources for the coming 12 months. How do you think they should be thinking about all of these talking points that we've fleshed out as they look to plan for the year ahead?
Yeah, it's a really great question. It's tempting to say you need to be allocating budget to sort of purchasing the right tools, but I'm not sure that's the right answer. Because I don't think your strategy and how you approach it should start with the tools. I think it needs to start with, as I said, the workflows, the data, and the people. And so I think you absolutely need to be thinking about allocating budget to it, but how you spend that, it should definitely start from first principles and not jumping into technology. That would be my view. And the other element of it is to really be thinking about the capabilities that you need in the team and what does that look like for your team next year? What sort of training are you going to give the team to build their capabilities? What sort of experiences and opportunities are you going to give the team? Because I think in a lot of cases, you sort of build the muscle by doing, not just sort of learning the theory.
Yeah. And Andrew, what excites you about all of this? I mean, from my perspective, the music industry is thriving, and I'm very happy to be corrected if I'm wrong about that. But as you mentioned a bit earlier, music's never been more accessible, and if we're going to liken that to legal services, hopefully we'll get to a point where access to justice is greater than it's ever been before, and that I think is a very encouraging prospect. But when you think about the likeness between what the music industry went through when the internet arrived versus how law is evolving in the age of AI, what excites you about the future?
Yeah, and some great insights there, Jerome. It sounds very daunting, and but I actually don't think it is. The music industry is thriving, and there's no reason to believe that the legal industry won't be thriving. I think that we are in the midst of the single biggest defining moment for the profession,
Mm.
like probably since its creation.
Yeah.
And again, while that might sound daunting, I actually find that quite energizing. The opportunity to be a part of that is quite energizing. I'm optimistic about what it means. I think it will look different, but I think it will be better. And the sort of thing I keep coming back to is in a world where we feel overwhelmed by abundant access to knowledge, and that's likely to be the case with AI, there will be value in making sense of all of that. And I think that's where lawyers do their best work. So I'm quite optimistic. I am quite excited. The sorts of things you mentioned about access to legal services, I think will be an excellent outcome. I think that's a given.
Andrew De Celis, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Jerome.
And thank you to the listener for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating and review on whatever platform you use to listen to podcasts, as it'll help other lawyers discover and enjoy this show. And if you've got ideas for other episodes we can run, please get in touch at editor@lawyersweekly.com.au. You can also find us on social media. See you again next time.